The letter arrived on a Tuesday, though I didn't open it until Friday. Thick cream paper, my name in elegant calligraphy, return address simply reading Blackwood Holdings, Ltd. I'd been unemployed for nearly 5 months. The estate management firm in Charleston had let me go with 2 weeks severance and empty promises about callbacks. My landlord had stopped being understanding 3 weeks ago. I tore open the envelope, expecting a credit card offer or some luxury sales pitch. Dear Mr. Brewer, your expertise in historic property preservation and grounds management has come to our attention. Blackwood Holdings requires an experienced estate manager for our ancestral property in the Appalachian Mountains. The position offers exceptional compensation for a 6-month residential commitment, beginning immediately. The salary figure made me read it twice. It was more than I'd earned in 2 years at my previous position. The letter continued with specifics that should have given me pause. The Blackwood estate is remote, accessible only by private road. The position requires complete residence on the property with no departures for the contract duration. Communication with our offices will be maintained through weekly email reports only. You must arrive alone. No visitors are permitted during your tenure. I should have questioned why anyone would pay so much for basic caretaking. I should have wondered why they chose me specifically. I should have asked what happened to the previous estate manager. Instead, I looked at my bank balance, swallowed my doubts, and called the number at the bottom of the page. That decision changed everything. The contract arrived by courier the next morning. 23 pages of dense legal text, confidentiality agreements thick enough to choke on, and liability waivers that should have sent me running. I read every word twice, a beer going warm in my hand as the afternoon light faded through my apartment window. Nothing illegal jumped out, though the confidentiality sections were aggressive. I couldn't discuss the property, the family, or anything I observed during my tenure. The penalties for breach were astronomical, 3 times my total compensation plus legal fees. What caught my attention was the payment structure. Half the total wired within 24 hours of signing, the remainder upon successful completion of 6 months. Even if I walked away halfway through, I'd still clear more than I'd made in the past 2 years combined. I called my sister Annie before making the decision. She picked up on the 3rd ring. Ernesto, everything okay? I got a job offer, I said, carefully avoiding specifics the contract already forbade. 6 months, estate management, remote location in Appalachia. The silence stretched long enough that I checked if the call had dropped. How remote? She finally asked. Very. No cell service, email only. And you're actually considering this? I looked at the eviction notice on my kitchen counter. The money's incredible, Annie. Life-changing. If something sounds too good to be true, I know, but I checked out the company. Blackwood Holdings is legitimate. Historic properties throughout the South. This is real. Another pause. Send me the exact location before you go, and call me, email me, whatever you can, as often as you can. I will, I promise. That night, I signed the contract and scanned it back to the email address provided. My phone buzzed 18 minutes later. Banking alert. The first payment had already cleared. I stared at the number on my screen, higher than my account had seen in years, and felt the first cold finger of doubt trace down my spine. Nobody moved this fast. Nobody paid this much. Unless they were desperate, or unless previous estate managers hadn't lasted long enough to collect the second half. I pushed the thought away and started packing. Within 48 hours, I was loading my truck with everything I'd need for 6 months of isolation. Clothes, tools, books, first aid supplies, enough canned goods to supplement whatever the estate provided. My rifle and shotgun went in last, wrapped carefully in their cases. As I threw the last duffel bag into the truck bed, my phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Brewer? A woman's voice, professional and cool.
This is Louise Arnold, Director of Operations for Blackwood Holdings. I'm calling to confirm your departure tomorrow morning. That's right, I have the coordinates. Excellent. I should mention, cell service ends approximately 30 miles from the property. Once you pass through Ravens Hollow, you'll be on your own until you reach the estate. The caretaker's manual is waiting for you there. Follow it precisely. Something in her tone made my stomach tighten. Is there anything I should know before? The everything you need is in the manual, Mr. Brewer. Welcome to Blackwood Estate. We'll be expecting your first report in 7 days. She hung up before I could respond. I stood in the parking lot of my soon-to-be former apartment, phone still pressed to my ear, watching the sun sink behind the buildings. The shadows stretched long and dark across the asphalt. 7 days until my first report, 6 months until I could leave. I'd signed away half a year of my life to people I'd never met, for a property I'd never seen, with rules I didn't yet understand. The money sat in my account like an anchor, already making it impossible to turn back. I climbed into my truck and started the engine. The Appalachian Mountains were waiting, and somewhere deep in those ancient peaks, the Blackwood Estate was waiting too. I just hoped it was only the estate that was waiting, and not something else entirely.
The drive took 11 hours. I left Charleston before dawn, watching the coastal plains give way to rolling hills, then to the jagged peaks of the Appalachian Range. The GPS worked fine until it didn't, signal dropping somewhere past Asheville as the roads narrowed and twisted like serpents climbing into the mountains. I switched to the printed directions Louise Arnold had included with the contract, turn-by-turn instructions written in that same elegant script from the original letter, leading me deeper into wilderness that felt increasingly untouched by the modern world. The last town of any size was a place called Ravens Hollow, population 340 according to a faded sign. I pulled into a gas station, deciding to fill up and grab any last-minute supplies before the final push to the estate. Inside, the attendant watched me with the particular attention small-town locals reserve for outsiders. He was maybe 60, weathered face and suspicious eyes. "Just passing through?" he asked as I set a coffee and some road snacks on the counter. "Headed up to the Blackwood estate," I said, starting a caretaking position. His hand froze halfway to the register. The woman browsing magazines near the door looked up sharply. "The Blackwell place?" he said slowly, not quite a question. "That's right. You know it?" He rang up my items without meeting my eyes. "Everybody knows it. Been there a long time." "I imagine historic properties like that are important to the local economy. 1750, he cut me off, his tone making it clear the conversation was over. I paid and left, feeling their eyes following me through the window as I returned to my truck. The woman had moved to stand beside the attendant, both of them watching me with expressions I couldn't quite read. Concern, maybe, or pity. I shook it off and followed the directions onto an unmarked forest road. The pavement lasted another 2 miles before giving way to gravel, then to dirt barely wide enough for my truck. Trees pressed in from both sides, ancient oaks and pines that blocked out most of the afternoon sun. Then I felt it, that strange sensation of recognition, of having been here before. The curve of the road ahead looked familiar, though I'd never been within 500 miles of these mountains. A specific rock formation triggered something like memory, impossible and certain at the same time. I gripped the steering wheel tighter and kept driving. The Blackwood estate appeared suddenly as the forest opened into a clearing. I'd expected something impressive based on the salary they were paying, but nothing had prepared me for this. The mansion rose 4 stories from a foundation of dark stone, Gothic architecture in its purest form. Spires reached toward the sky like accusing fingers. Dozens of windows reflected the dying sunlight, each one dark, despite the generator that supposedly powered the property. The structure seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, a black silhouette against the mountain backdrop. And it was immaculate.
Every stone in place, every piece of trim perfectly maintained, the grounds manicured to professional standards. Whatever this property needed, it wasn't basic maintenance. I parked in the circular drive and cut the engine. The silence hit me immediately, absolute and unnatural. No birds, no insects, no wind rustling through the trees, just my breathing and the tick of my cooling engine. The front steps were wide and shallow, leading to a massive door of dark wood reinforced with iron. The key from Louise Arnold's package turned smoothly in the lock. The door swung inward without a sound, opening onto a grand foyer that made my breath catch. Marble floors, a sweeping staircase, crystal chandelier catching the last rays of sunlight through stained glass windows, and everywhere that same meticulous maintenance. Not a speck of dust, not a cobweb in any corner. On the table in the center of the foyer sat a leather-bound book the size of a phone directory, gold lettering on the spine, Estate Manual, Blackwood Property. I picked it up, feeling the weight of it, and opened to the first page. Welcome to Blackwood Estate, Mr. Brewer. This manual contains all instructions necessary for your tenure. Read it completely before nightfall. Some rules exist for your protection. Others exist for reasons you will come to understand. All must be followed without exception. Rule 1. All exterior doors must be locked before sunset. No exceptions. Rule 2. Never enter the north wing after dark. Rule 3. If you hear your name called from outside after nightfall, do not answer. Do not investigate. Rule 4. The basement level is restricted. The door will remain locked. My hands had started trembling. I flipped through the pages, hundreds of rules, schedules, procedures, warnings, maps of the property showing boundaries I must not cross, lists of rooms I must not enter. And in the back, tucked in a small envelope, a handwritten note on aged paper. They always choose someone who looks like us. Always someone desperate enough not to ask questions. You have 7 days before you understand why. Use them wisely. S.M. The sun was touching the mountain peaks now, maybe 30 minutes from full sunset. According to Rule 1, I needed every door locked before then. I dropped my bags and ran.
I spent the next morning convincing myself the previous night had been imagination and exhaustion. The locked doors, the oppressive silence, the certain feeling that something walked the grounds after I'd retreated to the master bedroom, all of it could be explained by an unfamiliar house and an overactive mind. Then I found the tracks. They started at the tree line about 50 yards from the east wing, pressed deep into soft earth still damp from recent rain. I crouched beside them, my coffee forgotten in my hand, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Each print was roughly 15 inches long, shaped almost like a human foot, but wrong in ways that made my skin crawl. The toes were too long, spread too wide, and the depth suggested something far heavier than any person. The stride between prints was massive, at least 6 feet. I followed them. They circled the entire mansion, always staying just beyond the reach of the exterior lights before disappearing back into the forest on the north side. Something had walked the perimeter of Blackwood Estate last night. While I'd been inside, obeying Rule 1, something had been out here, watching. I pulled out my phone to take pictures, then remembered, no cell service. I'd have to use the estate's computer to document this in my first weekly report to Louise Arnold, the report due in 4 days. 4 days. The note in the manual had said 7 days before I'd understand why. 3 had already passed since I'd arrived, though I could only clearly remember 2. Yesterday remained frustratingly hazy, like trying to recall a dream after waking. I needed supplies. More importantly, I needed information. The estate manual answered what to do, but never why. The townspeople of Ravenshollow might be more forthcoming in person than the gas station attendant had been.
The drive down the mountain felt different in daylight, less oppressive, more beautiful. I could appreciate the autumn colors, the way mist clung to the valleys between peaks. I could almost forget the wrongness of those tracks. Ravens Hollow looked exactly as I'd left it, a handful of buildings clustered along a single main street, the gas station at one end and a general store at the other. I parked in front of Harper's Supply and stepped inside. The woman behind the counter looked up from her inventory clipboard and smiled. "Ernesto, back already? Thought you usually came in on Thursdays." My blood went cold. "I'm sorry, what?" "Thursdays," she repeated, her smile fading slightly. "You're here early. Is everything okay up at the estate?" "We've never met," I said carefully. "I just arrived 3 days ago." She laughed, but it sounded uncertain. "Very funny, Ernesto. You've been coming in here for, well, must be years now. Always the same order, batteries, coffee, those protein bars you like?" An older man examining fishing tackle nearby nodded. "Brewer, didn't expect to see you till the weekend. You helped my grandson fix his truck last month, remember?" The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. "My name is Ernesto Brewer, but I've never been to this town before Friday. I've never met either of you." The woman, her name tag read Velma, exchanged a worried glance with the old man. "Ernesto, are you feeling all right? Do you need me to call someone?" "What's today's date?" I asked, pulling out my phone. "October 17th, Velma said. My phone confirmed it. October 17th. But I had arrived at Blackwood Estate on October 5th. That was 3 days ago. Except it wasn't. 12 days had passed. 12 days I couldn't remember. "I need to see any records you have," I said, hearing the desperation in my voice. "Security footage, credit card receipts, anything showing me here." Velma hesitated, then pulled up her computer. "Your last purchase was October 15th. Same as always, batteries, coffee, those protein bars you like. Paid cash like you always do, made a joke about the weather, and left." "Can I see the footage?" "We don't have cameras, Ernesto. Never needed them." She reached across the counter, genuine concern in her eyes. "What's happening up there? What's wrong?" I backed toward the door. "Where's the library? Local history, newspapers, anything historical." "End of Pine Street, but Ernesto." I was already running. The Ravens Hollow Library was a single-room building that smelled of old paper and mildew. The librarian, a woman in her 70s, looked up as I burst through the door. "Local history, everything you have on Blackwood Estate." She studied me for a long moment, then pointed to a filing cabinet in the back corner. "Newspaper archives, start with the 1890s. I dove into the files, pulling out yellowed newspapers, scanning headlines. The pattern emerged within an hour. 1897, Blackwood Manor complete, architectural marvel in the mountains. 1904, caretaker Samuel Morton missing, search called off after 2 weeks. 1911, new caretaker David Terranova appointed after mysterious disappearance. 1918, Walter Diamond vanishes, Blackwood Estate claims another. Every 7 years, different names, different men, but the same story. They arrived, they worked as caretakers, they disappeared. And in every case where there was a photograph, the men looked disturbingly similar. Same build, same general features, same dark hair. They all looked like me. My hands shook as I found the most recent article, dated 2016. Ernesto M. Brewer, appointed Blackwood Estate Manager. The photograph showed a man identical to my reflection. Same face, same eyes, the same scar on my chin from a childhood accident. According to these records, I'd been the caretaker for 7 years. But I had a different life. I had work records from Charleston, an apartment, a sister who spoke to me last week. I had memories of everywhere except here. The librarian appeared beside me, moving with surprising quiet. "You found them, the others," she said softly. "What's happening to me?" "The same thing that happened to all of them." She pulled out a slim folder I'd missed, marked with a single word: warnings. People have tried to document it over the years, tried to warn the next one. It never works. You always come anyway. Inside were handwritten notes, some dating back decades, desperate accounts from previous caretakers describing memory loss, time distortions, the feeling of becoming someone, something else. The final note was dated October 12, 2023, 5 days ago, in the missing time I couldn't remember. "My name is Ernesto M. Brewer. If you're reading this, you're me, or what I was. The estate is taking us, replacing us. 7 days from arrival, the transformation completes. I have 4 days left. Don't trust your memories. Don't trust the townspeople. They only know what the estate wants them to know. And whatever you do, don't go into the basement. That's where you'll find the truth. That's where you'll find yourself. The real you is already there, waiting." The note was in my handwriting. I staggered out of the library into afternoon sunlight that suddenly felt too bright, too normal for what I'd just learned. My truck sat where I'd left it. Raven's Hollow continued its sleepy existence around me. Everything looked normal. But I'd lost 12 days. An entire town remembered a version of me I'd never been. And somewhere in the basement of Blackwood Estate, the basement the manual explicitly forbade, something was waiting. Something that was me, but not me. I had 4 days left, 4 days before whatever transformation had claimed every previous caretaker, claimed me too. The drive back to the estate took forever and no time at all. As I pulled into the circular drive, I noticed something I'd missed before. Carved into the door frame, barely visible unless you knew to look, were initials and dates. SM 1904 to 1911, DT 1911 to 1918, WD 1918 to 1925. The list continued down to EMB 2016. The space after the dash was empty, waiting for an ending date. Waiting for me to complete the cycle. I checked my watch. 4:47 p.m. Sunset in 73 minutes. According to Rule 1, all doors had to be locked by then. According to the note I'd written myself, the truth was in the basement, the door I was forbidden to open. My hand found the keys in my pocket. One of them was larger than the others, older, made of iron that felt cold even through my gloves. I pulled it out and held it up to the fading light. It looked exactly like a basement key.
The basement door was exactly where the estate blueprints said it would be, tucked behind the grand staircase in the main foyer, easy to miss in the shadows if you weren't looking for it. Heavy oak reinforced with iron bands, a lock that looked like it belonged in a medieval castle. I stood there for 20 minutes, the old key burning cold in my palm, weighing my options. The manual had been explicit. The basement level is restricted. The door will remain locked. But the note I'd apparently written to myself had been equally clear. The truth is in the basement. That's where you'll find yourself. Sunset was 53 minutes away. I slid the key into the lock. It turned with a grinding sound that echoed through the foyer, metal on metal, like something waking up after a long sleep. The door swung inward, revealing stone steps descending into absolute darkness. The light switch didn't work. Of course it didn't. I grabbed a flashlight from my supplies and started down. The temperature dropped with each step, my breath forming clouds in the beam of light. The stairs seemed to go on forever, far deeper than the foundation of any normal house.
By the time I reached the bottom, I must have been 30 feet underground. The basement was nothing like the elegant mansion above. Raw stone walls, low ceiling, the smell of earth and something else, something chemical and sterile that didn't belong. The flashlight beam found a hallway leading north toward what I estimated was the center of the estate. I followed it, counting my steps, 32 paces to another door, this one modern, steel with a keypad lock glowing red in the darkness. A keypad that shouldn't have power if the light switch at the top of the stairs didn't work. I tried the obvious codes. 1897, the year the estate was built. Red light blinked, access denied. October 5th, my arrival date, 10:05, denied. October 17th, today's date, 1017, denied. Then I remembered the note, October 12th, 2023, 5 days ago in the missing time, the day I'd supposedly written the warning. 1012, the light turned green, the lock clicked open with a hiss of pressurized air. The room beyond made my stomach drop. It looked like a medical facility. Concrete walls covered in those same carved symbols I'd seen on the trees outside, but here they were painted in something dark that might have been blood or might have been something worse. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, powered by a generator I could hear thrumming in the walls. In the center of the room sat a glass case, roughly the size and shape of a coffin, elevated on a metal platform. Tubes and wires connected it to monitoring equipment along the walls, screens displaying vital signs and brain activity and data I didn't understand. Inside the case, perfectly preserved, was me. Not someone who looked like me, not a similar build or features, my exact face, my exact body, even wearing clothes identical to what I'd had on when I arrived at the estate. The scar on his chin, my chin, from falling off my bike at age 7. The small burn mark on his left forearm from a tamping accident 3 years ago. He was breathing, chest rising and falling in steady rhythm, eyes closed like he was sleeping. I staggered backward, hitting the wall, flashlight clattering to the floor. The beam rolled across the concrete, illuminating another section of the room I'd missed. Filing cabinets lined the far wall. I forced myself toward them, pulling open drawers with shaking hands. Folders labeled with names and dates. Samuel Morton, 1904 to 1911. David Terranova, 1911 to 1918. Walter Diamond, 1918 to 1925. The list went on. Decades of caretakers, each with detailed records. Medical files, photographs, and in each folder the same 2 images, one showing the caretaker at arrival and one showing what they'd become. The second photographs made me want to vomit. They weren't human anymore, twisted, elongated forms that might have started as men but had been corrupted into something else. In every image, the thing that had been the caretaker stood in the same location, the forest north of the estate, surrounded by those carved symbols. I found my folder, Ernesto M. Brewer, 2016 to present, my arrival photo from 7 years ago, except I'd only arrived 3 days ago, 12 days ago, whatever the hell the real timeline was anymore. The second photograph slot was empty, waiting. But there was a handwritten log, entries dating back to 2016, written in a clinical hand I recognized from the contract documents, Louise Arnold's handwriting. October 5th, 2016. Subject arrived, initial integration successful, memory establishment beginning. October 17th, 2016. First cycle complete. Subject experiencing temporal distortions as expected. Town implantation stable. October 24th, 2016. Transformation delayed. Subject showing resistance. Adjusting protocol. The entries continued for 7 years, hundreds of pages documenting my life at Blackwood Estate, a life I had no memory of living. detailed accounts of my daily routines, my trips to town, my maintenance of the property.
And gradually, over the years, notes about physical changes, height increasing, bone density shifting, cellular restructuring. The final entry was dated yesterday, October 16, 2023. Subject nearing completion of transformation cycle. Replacement activation scheduled for October 24. Estimated 8 days until full integration. 8 days from my arrival, 5 days from now. I looked back at the glass case, at the perfect copy of me sleeping inside. Replacement, that's what the log called it. When whatever I was becoming completed its transformation, this thing would wake up. It would have all my memories, my personality, everything that made me Ernesto Brewer. It would walk out of here and live my life, while I became something else entirely. The monitoring equipment next to the case showed brain activity patterns, neural maps, vital signs, all active, all stable. This wasn't a clone or a corpse. It was alive, conscious on some level, just waiting to wake up. I found what looked like emergency controls on the side of the case. Red handle behind glass marked emergency release. My hand hovered over it. If I destroyed this thing, no one would replace me in the outside world. My sister Annie would wonder why I'd disappeared, but at least she wouldn't be fooled by an imposter. Glass broke easily under my flashlight. I grabbed the red handle and pulled. The case hissed open, releasing a cloud of cold vapor. The duplicate's eyes snapped open, my eyes, but empty, unfocused. It sat up robotically, tubes still connected to its arms and neck. Its mouth opened, but no sound came out, just a hollow rasp, like machinery trying to mimic breath. Then I heard it, from upstairs, from outside, from everywhere at once. A sound like my voice, but wrong, distorted, resonant with something ancient and hungry beneath the human tone. The boundary knows. The boundary remembers. The cycle must complete. The lights flickered. The monitoring equipment screamed alarms. The duplicate turned its head toward me with mechanical precision. And somewhere above, something massive slammed against the basement door. I ran for the stairs, taking them 3 at a time, my flashlight beam bouncing wildly. Behind me, I heard the duplicate climbing out of the case, heard tubes tearing free, heard its footsteps following with that same mechanical rhythm. I hit the top of the stairs as the basement door shuddered again. The ancient wood was splintering, iron bands bending inward. Something on the other side was trying to get in, or trying to stop me from getting out. The sun had set. I'd broken Rule 1, and now I was trapped in a basement with something wearing my face while something else tried to break through the only exit. The door exploded inward in a shower of splinters and twisted metal. Standing in the foyer, silhouetted against the darkness beyond, was exactly what I was becoming. 8 feet tall, impossibly thin, arms that hung past my knees, ending in fingers twice too long with black claws at the tips. The head was the worst, my face stretched over an elongated skull, jaw distended, mouth full of teeth that shouldn't exist. It looked at me with eyes that still held traces of human awareness, traces of all the previous caretakers trapped in one corrupted form. And it spoke with my voice, with all their voices layered together. 7 days, Ernesto. You have 7 days. Then you join us. Then you are us. And your replacement will never know the difference. The duplicate grabbed my arm from behind with strength no human should possess. The thing in the doorway smiled with too many teeth. And I realized the horrible truth. I wasn't choosing between my humanity and transformation. I'd been transforming since the moment I arrived.
I tore free from the duplicate's grip, skin tearing where its fingers had grabbed me, and threw myself sideways into the dining room. The creature in the doorway, the thing I was becoming, moved with predatory grace, but the duplicate was slower, still adjusting to its newly awakened body. I had seconds, maybe less. The dining room had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the east lawn. I grabbed a chair and hurled it through the glass, the crash impossibly loud in the unnatural silence. Cold air rushed in as I dove through the opening, hitting the ground hard, rolling across manicured grass that felt wrong beneath my hands, too soft, too perfect, like astroturf instead of real earth. Behind me, both things were coming. The creature flowed through the broken window like liquid shadow. The duplicate climbed through with jerky, learning movements, getting faster with each step. I ran for the forest, for the boundary line I'd discovered days ago. If I could cross it, if I could break through whatever held me here. Pain exploded through my right hand. I looked down and nearly screamed. My skin was changing, gray patches spreading across my knuckles, texture shifting from flesh to something hard and rough like bark. The bones beneath were moving, lengthening, joints cracking as they reshaped themselves. I'd felt fine an hour ago, completely human. But that was before I'd opened the basement, before I'd released the duplicate, before I'd broken the rules that had kept whatever process this was under control. Now it was accelerating. I crashed into the tree line, branches whipping my face, roots trying to catch my feet. The carved symbols appeared in my flashlight beam, marking the boundary in a perfect circle around the estate. I didn't slow down. I hit the invisible barrier at full speed. Reality bent. One moment I was running north into the forest. The next I was stumbling south, back toward the mansion, my momentum redirected without transition. I spun around, tried again, aiming east this time. Same result. 3 steps into the forest, and suddenly I was facing the house again, my direction reversed without me noticing the turn. The boundary wasn't a wall, it was a loop, a trap that made escape impossible by convincing you that you were always running toward it, never away. Through the trees, I saw them coming. The creature moved with terrifying purpose, no longer rushing. It knew I couldn't leave. The duplicate followed, learning to run, its movements becoming more fluid with each passing moment. I changed tactics, running parallel to the boundary, following the carved symbols. There had to be a break, a weak point, something. Every prison had a flaw. My left hand erupted in the same pain, gray spreading, fingers elongating. I looked at both hands as I ran and wanted to sob. They were becoming claws, real, functional claws designed for tearing and rending. The transformation wasn't gradual anymore. It was cascading, accelerating beyond control. I found what I was looking for 1/2 mile around the boundary's curve, a gap in the symbols, 20 feet where no markings appeared on any tree, as if someone had deliberately left an opening where the symbols had been worn away over time. I didn't hesitate. I plunged through. This time, there was no reality bend. I kept running north, the forest streaming past, the estate falling behind. My lungs burned, my changing hands screamed, but I was beyond the boundary. I was free. I ran until my legs gave out, collapsing against a massive oak tree at least a mile from the estate. My flashlight beam shook as I examined my hands. The gray had stopped spreading, frozen at my wrists. The elongation had ceased. Whatever process the boundary had contained, leaving it seemed to have paused the transformation, but not reversed it. My hands remained twisted, clawed, inhuman. I pulled out my phone. Still no service, but the GPS worked. I was north of the estate, heading toward Raven's Hollow. If I could reach the town, reach people, maybe someone could help. Maybe the librarian knew more than she said. Ernesto? I spun. Velma stood in the doorway of her shop, still dressed, a bag of trash in her hands. She must have been closing up late. Velma, talk, thank God. Something's happening to me. You're late, she said calmly, dropping the trash bag. You usually come through town around 10 p.m. on your night walks. It's nearly 1 a.m. Were you delayed? Ice flooded my veins. What are you talking about? Your walks, Ernesto. Every few nights you pass through town. You started doing it about 6 years ago. Always the same route, always the same time. You never stop, never talk, you just walk. I started, then stopped. The missing 12 days, the memories I didn't have. What do I look like when I walk through town? Her smile never wavered. Like you, Ernesto, exactly like you. Show me your hands, I said quietly. What? Your hands, show me. Velma held them up, palms out. Normal human hands. No claws, no gray skin.
I pulled my own from my pockets. In the streetlight, the transformation was obvious. Gray, hardened skin, fingers too long, black claws gleaming. Velma's expression didn't change. She looked at my hands with the same pleasant emptiness she'd shown since I arrived. "That's normal, Ernesto," she said. "That's how you always look." I backed away, horror crawling up my spine. "You're not real. None of you are real. The estate made you. It made all of this." "The estate protects us," Velma said. "The estate provides. The estate—" I ran. Other doors were opening now, people stepping out into the street. The old man from the gas station, the librarian, others I recognized from my brief time in town, all of them with the same empty eyes, the same flat smiles, all of them moving toward me with slow, purposeful steps. "The estate protects," they chanted in unison. "The estate provides. The estate endures." I ran north, out of town, into the forest beyond. Behind me, the chanting continued, echoing through the valley. I ran until dawn, until my transformed hands were scraped and bleeding from pushing through underbrush, until my human legs finally gave out miles from anything resembling civilization. I collapsed beside a stream, drinking desperately, trying to think through the exhaustion and terror. The boundary wasn't just around the estate, it was everywhere. The whole region, the town, the roads, the forest itself was part of the trap, an elaborate illusion maintaining the appearance of normalcy while the estate did its work. How many caretakers had tried to escape? How many had run to Raven's Hollow seeking help, only to find a town of mannequins playing at humanity? My reflection in the stream showed what I was becoming, gray spreading up my neck now, visible even in the dawn light. My eyes slightly larger, slightly darker, jaw beginning to extend. I had days left, maybe less, and I'd destroyed my replacement. Even if I died, even if I completed the transformation, there would be no one to wake up and live my life in the outside world. Annie would know I disappeared. She'd search. She'd find records leading to Blackwell Holdings, to Raven's Hollow, maybe even to the estate itself. And then what? Would the boundary trap her too? Would she become another empty-eyed puppet? Or would the estate find use for her in its endless cycle? I had to go back, not to surrender, but to find the real answers. The filing cabinets in the basement contained 7 years of records, but I'd barely scratched the surface. Somewhere in that documentation was an explanation, how this started, why it continued, and most importantly, how to end it. The estate expected me to run, expected me to exhaust myself trying to escape, to wear down my resistance until the transformation completed naturally. But I'd seen something else in those files, in the photographs of previous caretakers turned monster, in the clinical notes documenting the process.
Every one of them had accepted it. Every one had eventually stopped fighting and let the change consume them. What if someone didn't accept it? What if someone fought until the very end? I stood on shaking legs, my clawed hands clenched into fists, and started walking back toward Blackwood Estate. If this curse wanted me, it would take me piece by piece, and I'd make sure it choked on every single one.
The estate looked serene in morning light, beautiful even. Sunlight glinted off intact windows. The glass I'd shattered last night had somehow repaired itself. The front door stood closed and undamaged despite the creature having torn through it. Even the grass where I'd rolled and bled showed no trace of disturbance. The house healed itself. Of course it did. I entered through the front door, which opened at my touch. Inside, the basement door had been restored, the heavy oak and iron bands looking as though they'd never been touched. But it hung open now, an invitation, or a dare. I descended the stairs with my flashlight, though I didn't need it. The lights were on, fluorescent hum filling the underground space. Someone, something, wanted me to see. The modern door at the hallway's end stood open as well. I stepped into the medical room, half expecting to find the creature waiting, the duplicate lurking in shadows. Instead, the room was empty. The glass case where my replacement had slept sat open, its interior pristine as if it had never been occupied. The monitoring equipment displayed flat lines. The tubes and wires hung disconnected, trailing across the floor like dead snakes. But the filing cabinets remained. I went to them with purpose this time, pulling folders systematically. If I only had days left before losing myself completely, I needed to understand what I was becoming. The oldest records told a different story than I'd expected. Thaddeus Blackwell hadn't built the estate in 1897. He'd found it, discovered an existing structure far older than any colonial architecture, hidden deep in the mountains where indigenous peoples had sealed it away centuries before. The construction records were a lie, a way to explain the sudden appearance of a massive Gothic mansion in the middle of nowhere. What Thaddeus had really done was open something that should have stayed closed. His journal entries made for horrifying reading. June 12, 1897. The structure is unlike anything in our architectural tradition. The stones predate European settlement by centuries, perhaps millennia. The symbols carved throughout match no known indigenous language, yet I feel certain of their purpose. This is a prison. June 30th, 1897. I was wrong. Not a prison, a chrysalis. Something sleeps here, has slept for ages beyond counting. The local tribes speak of it in whispers. The shadow that walks, the hunger that wears faces. They sealed it here, fed it human essence to keep it dormant, one soul every 7 years, maintaining the boundary between its reality and ours. July 15th, 1897. I have made a terrible mistake. In attempting to study the entity, I weakened the seals. It is waking. The transformation has begun in me. I can feel it changing my body, my mind. But I've discovered something the tribes did not. With the right preparation, the right rituals, the essence can be transferred, a replacement can be made. The transformed one can be recycled. July 28, 1897. The process is complete. I am no longer Thaddeus Blackwell, yet I am. The thing I was becoming has been sealed back into dormancy, and this new body, grown from my own essence, has taken my place, my memories intact, my identity preserved. The original me walks the boundary now, neither alive nor dead, a guardian containing the entity's hunger. This is the secret. This is how we cheat death itself. The implications hit me like a freight train. The creature wasn't a monster that previous caretakers had become. It was all of them simultaneously, every soul fed to the entity over 120 years, merged into a single guardian form that contained and channeled its power. And the replacements weren't copies. They were the same person, reborn into a new body, while their old self became part of the guardian, another layer of humanity wrapped around something ancient and hungry.
Thaddeus Blackwell hadn't discovered immortality. He'd discovered serial reincarnation, each cycle requiring a sacrifice to maintain the boundary and a replacement to continue living in the outside world. But he'd needed victims who wouldn't be missed, who could disappear into the mountains for years at a time, whose absence would be explained by the job itself. He'd needed desperate men with no close ties, men who looked similar enough that the replacements could pass for the originals. Men like me. I found a folder labeled Complications. Inside were records of caretakers who'd resisted, who'd tried to break the cycle. Some had attempted suicide. The guardian had prevented it, the boundary healing all wounds. Some had tried to destroy the estate. It rebuilt itself overnight. Some had tried to warn outsiders. The town of Ravens Hollow existed precisely to intercept such attempts, populated by fragments of the entity's consciousness wearing human shapes. But one caretaker had come close to succeeding, Walter Diamond, 1918 to 1925. His notes were tucked into the back of his file, written in increasingly frantic handwriting. The entity isn't immortal. It's a parasite, surviving by consuming human consciousness while wearing human flesh. The boundary doesn't contain it. We contain it. Every guardian is another prison bar. But if the cycle breaks, if no new replacement wakes to take the place of the transformed one, the entity fractures. Without a new vessel, it cannot maintain coherence. It would have to choose, disperse completely, or concentrate into the existing guardian. I've destroyed my replacement, burned it before activation. When my transformation completes, there will be nowhere for my consciousness to go, except into the guardian with all the others. But there will be no new body to wake up and continue my life. Annie will know I disappeared, but the entity would be forced to make the same choice Walter made 100 years ago. Disperse and risk destruction, or concentrate and become killable.
I was betting my existence, my soul, that it would choose concentration, that its hunger and pride would demand it maintain physical form. And when it did, when all that ancient power compressed into a single tangible creature, I needed a weapon, something that could kill what I was becoming, what we were all becoming. The filing cabinets held one more folder, marked simply Contingencies. Inside was a map of the estate with an X marked in the forest north of the mansion, near the boundary's edge. A single note accompanied it in Louise Arnold's clinical handwriting. Emergency Termination Protocol. Original sealing site. Indigenous ritual blade, silver and obsidian, designed specifically to sever the entity's connection to this dimension. Use only as final resort. Termination of guardian terminates all contained consciousness. There is no survival. There is no return. A ritual blade designed to kill what was unkillable, hidden in the forest, waiting for someone desperate or brave enough to use it. I memorized the location and started for the stairs. As I climbed, I felt the changes accelerating. My spine was lengthening, adding vertebrae. My jaw ached with new teeth pushing through my gums. The transformation wouldn't wait for the full 7 days anymore. I'd broken too many rules, disrupted the careful process. I might have hours left, a day at most. I needed to find that blade before I lost myself completely, before whatever remained of Ernesto Brewer dissolved into the collective consciousness of the guardian, just another voice screaming in a chorus of the damned. At the top of the stairs, I found them waiting. The duplicate stood in the foyer, now fully functional, moving with human grace. It had my face, my posture, everything. When it spoke, the voice was mine, but the words were wrong. You should have let it happen naturally. The transition is easier when you don't fight. More of you survives the merging. Behind it, the creature, the guardian, filled the doorway,
8 feet of corrupted humanity containing 120 years of consumed souls. When it spoke, I heard echoes of all the voices trapped inside. The cycle must complete, Ernesto. The boundary must hold. You cannot end what has endured for millennia.
I pulled my hands from my pockets, letting them see the claws, the gray skin, the inhuman transformation. "Watch me," I said, and dove through the nearest window. Glass shattered. I hit the ground running, heading north toward the forest, toward the marked location on the map, toward the one weapon that might end this nightmare once and for all. Behind me, they followed, the duplicate running with my speed and endurance, the guardian flowing through the darkness like animated shadow. Both of them knowing exactly where I was going, both of them willing to let me get there, because they knew what I would find, and they knew I wouldn't have the courage to use it. The map coordinates led me to a clearing I recognized, the same place I'd seen on my first night exploring the property, though I hadn't registered its significance then. A perfect circle of bare earth, surrounded by ancient pines, their trunks carved with symbols far older than Thaddeus Blackwell's mansion. This was the original sealing site where indigenous peoples had first imprisoned the entities centuries ago. In the center stood a stone altar, waist-high, its surface stained black with age and something else I didn't want to identify. And embedded in that altar, driven through the stone itself like Excalibur waiting for its king, was the blade. Silver and obsidian, the handle wrapped in leather so old it had petrified. The metal gleamed in the moonlight. Wrong moonlight, I realized, because it had been dawn when I'd left the estate. Time moved differently here, the boundary distorting more than just space. I approached slowly, my transformed legs carrying me with a grace that felt increasingly natural. My reflection in the blade's polished surface showed what I'd become. Face elongated, eyes too large and dark, skin completely gray now from fingertips to neck. Only my torso remained human, but I could feel the changes creeping across my chest with every heartbeat. I reached for the weapon. "I wouldn't," a voice said from behind me. I spun. The duplicate stood at the clearing's edge, hands in pockets, wearing my favorite jacket with my characteristic slouch. It looked so perfectly human that my heart ached with the wrongness of it. "You're not real," I said, through a mouth that no longer fit properly around words. "You're just a shell, waiting to steal my life." "I'm as real as you are, Ernesto. More real, perhaps. I have all your memories, not the edited versions the boundary lets you keep, but everything. I remember your first kiss at 16. I remember the sound your mother made when the cancer took her. I remember Annie calling you when her husband left her, and you drove 18 hours straight to be there. Hearing my sister's name in my own voice, from my own face, made something crack inside me. I remember every moment of your life," the duplicate continued, stepping into the clearing. "And I remember the 7 years you don't. 7 years of slowly transforming, of fighting and losing, of watching yourself become something else piece by piece. You've lived this before, Ernesto. You've stood in this exact spot, holding that exact blade, trying to make this exact choice. October 24th, 2023, the day you were supposed to complete the transition. You're lying." "Am I?" He smiled sadly. "Check your jacket pocket, the left one." With a clawed hand that barely functioned anymore, I reached into my pocket. My fingers closed around paper, old and brittle. I pulled it out. A photograph. Me and Annie at her wedding 5 years ago. On the back, in my handwriting, October 2018. Last time I saw her before the estate, before I forgot.
But I had seen Annie since then. I'd talked to her on the phone before accepting this job, just 2 weeks ago. She'd warned me it sounded too good to be true. Except, had I? Or was that a memory the boundary had given me, a comfortable fiction to explain the gap in my real timeline? You arrived in 2016, the duplicate said quietly. You've been transforming for 7 years. The boundary let you retain enough humanity to function, enough consciousness to maintain the estate, enough memory to believe you were still yourself. But every October, when the cycle reached its peak, you'd remember. You'd see what you were becoming. You'd try to stop it. And the next morning, you'd forget again, reset to believing you'd just arrived. I looked at my hands, fully clawed now, barely recognizable as human. 7 years? Had I been losing myself for 7 years while thinking it was only days? The entity is patient, the duplicate continued. It feeds slowly, savoring each soul it consumes. It could transform you in an instant, but where's the pleasure in that? Better to let you watch yourself disappear gradually, to feel each humanity being stripped away, to know that fighting only prolongs the agony. The guardian emerged from the tree line, all 8 feet of corrupted flesh and collected consciousness. When it spoke, I heard my own voice among the others, younger, more frightened, screaming from somewhere deep inside that mass of consumed souls. "He's there," I whispered. "The me from 7 years ago, still aware, still suffering." "All of us are," the guardian said with 100 voices. "Every caretaker, every soul, conscious and trapped. Walter Diamond screams his warnings every day. Thaddeus Blackwell whispers his regrets. Samuel Morton, David Terranova, all the others. We are the boundary, Ernesto. We are the bars of the prison, and you're about to join us." I grabbed the blade's handle and pulled. It came free from the stone like a ringing crystal, so sharp it hurt my deformed ears. Power thrummed through the weapon, ancient and purposeful. The symbols carved in the obsidian gleamed with inner light. "You can kill you," I said, raising it. "All of you. Every consumed soul, gone. No more suffering, no more prison, just oblivion." "Yes," the guardian agreed, "but you have to complete the transformation first. The blade only works on the entity's physical manifestation, on what we are, not what you're becoming. You're not merged yet. You're still separate, still mostly human." The duplicate took another step closer. "You have 2 choices. You can wait, let the transformation finish, then drive that blade into the guardian's heart. You'll kill it, kill yourself, kill everyone trapped inside. The boundary will fail. The entity will disperse. Something worse than death will be unleashed into this world. But at least you won't suffer anymore." "Or," I croaked, "or you can let me wake up fully, complete the cycle as designed. Your consciousness transfers into the guardian with all the others, and I take your place in the world. I go back to Charleston. I call Annie and apologize for being out of touch. I get a normal job, live a normal life, and you get to watch through the guardian's eyes, one voice among many, as I become you better than you ever were." "That's not a choice. That's surrender." The duplicate's expression hardened. "No, Ernesto, surrender is what you're doing now. Running, hiding, destroying things you don't understand. The cycle exists for a reason. Without it, without guardians to maintain the boundary, the entity spreads. It consumes everything it touches. The indigenous peoples who sealed it here knew what would happen if it ever got free. They sacrificed themselves in tens, in hundreds to create this prison. All we're asking is one soul every 7 years. One life to save countless others. You're asking me to become that thing," I pointed the blade at the guardian, "to spend eternity trapped in a shell of meat, conscious but helpless, watching replacement after replacement live my life while I scream in the darkness." "Yes," the Guardian said simply. "We're asking you to serve, as we serve, as all who came before have served. The boundary must hold, Ernesto. The price must be paid." My clawed hands tightened on the blade's handle. The silver burned against my corrupted flesh, leaving marks that smoked and reeked. In hours, maybe less, I'd complete the transformation. I'd merge with the Guardian and lose myself forever in that collective nightmare. Unless I used the blade on myself first. The contingency file hadn't specified what would happen if I killed myself before completing the transformation. Would it stop the entity, free the souls trapped in the Guardian, or would it accomplish nothing except adding my death to the list of failures? "There's a third option," a voice called from the tree line. We all turned. A woman stepped into the clearing, early 30s, wearing hiking gear and carrying a camera that looked like it had seen serious use. She held up the camera, snapping photos of the Guardian, the duplicate, the ritual blade in my deformed hands. "Annie?" The word came out garbled through my deformed mouth, but the shock was clear. "Hey, big brother," she lowered the camera, her expression hard. "You stopped answering my emails 3 weeks ago. The last one you sent said you were heading to some estate management job in the Appalachians. I got worried, hired a private investigator. He found records of your truck at a gas station in Ravens Hollow, dated October 5th. That was 3 weeks ago, not 3 days.
I was betting my existence, my soul, that it would choose concentration, that its hunger and pride would demand it maintain physical form. And when it did, when all that ancient power compressed into a single tangible creature, I needed a weapon, something that could kill what I was becoming, what we were all becoming. The filing cabinets held one more folder marked simply contingencies. Inside was a map of the estate with an X marked in the forest north of the mansion, near the boundary's edge. A single note accompanied it in Louise Arnold's clinical handwriting. Emergency Termination Protocol, Original Sealing Site, Indigenous Ritual Blade, Silver and Obsidian, designed specifically to sever the entity's connection to this dimension. Use only as final resort. Termination of Guardian terminates all contained consciousness. There is no survival. There is no return. A ritual blade designed to kill what was unkillable, hidden in the forest, waiting for someone desperate or brave enough to use it. I memorized the location and started for the stairs. As I climbed, I felt the changes accelerating. My spine was lengthening, adding vertebrae. My jaw ached with new teeth pushing through my gums. The transformation wouldn't wait for the full 7 days anymore. I'd broken too many rules, disrupted the careful process. I might have hours left, a day at most. I needed to find that blade before I lost myself completely, before whatever remained of Ernesto Brewer dissolved into the collective consciousness of the Guardian. Just another voice screaming in a chorus of the damned. At the top of the stairs, I found them waiting. The duplicate stood in the foyer, now fully functional, moving with human grace. It had my face, my posture, everything. When it spoke, the voice was mine, but the words were wrong. "You should have let it happen naturally. The transition is easier when you don't fight. More of you survives the merging." Behind it, the creature, the Guardian, filled the doorway, 8 feet of corrupted humanity, containing 120 years of consumed souls. When it spoke, I heard echoes of all the voices trapped inside. The duplicate moved toward her. "Ma'am, you need to leave. This is private property." "Shut up, knockoff." Annie pulled something from her backpack, a small leather journal, old and water-stained. She found this in an antique shop in Asheville, sold by someone from Ravens Hollow about 90 years ago.
Journal of Margaret Chen, wife of David Terranova, one of your previous caretakers. She never believed he abandoned her. She came looking, and she found what you people are doing." She opened the journal, reading aloud. "The entity feeds on isolation, on desperation, on men who have nothing to lose. But it has a weakness. It cannot take someone who is truly known, truly loved, truly missed. The replacements work because no one looks closely, no one asks questions, no one loves the victims enough to notice they've been replaced." Annie looked at me, at my transformed face, and I saw no horror in her eyes, only determination. "You know me, Ernesto. I know you're afraid of thunderstorms because lightning struck our neighbor's house when you were 8. I know you can't stand the taste of cilantro. I know you cried during the last scene of Field of Dreams, even though you pretend it's allergies. That thing," she pointed at the duplicate, "might have your memories, but it's never going to be you, and I'll make sure everyone knows it." The guardian moved closer, looming over her. "You cannot stop the cycle, child. You can only doom yourself to join it." "Maybe," Annie said, "but I've got a live stream running, 10,000 people watching, my social media followers, crime true communities, paranormal investigators. They know where I am. They know what I'm looking for. And if I don't check in every hour, they've got instructions to contact the FBI, state police, and every news outlet in the region." She smiled, and it was fierce. "You can't make me disappear without questions. You can't replace me without someone noticing. I'm not isolated. I'm not desperate. I'm not alone. And neither is my brother." The duplicate and guardian exchanged looks, if masses of corrupted flesh could be said to exchange looks. Something passed between them, some communication beyond words. "This changes things," the guardian finally said. "This changes nothing," the duplicate countered. "The transition is nearly complete. In hours he'll have a choice, but this time he'll make it knowing someone gives a damn whether he lives or dies." She walked to me, standing close despite my monstrous appearance, and held out her hand, human and warm and alive. "Come home, Ernesto. Whatever you've become, we'll figure it out together, but you don't dare give up. You don't dare let these things convince you that you don't matter." I looked at the blade in my clawed hand, at the guardian containing 100 screaming souls, at the duplicate wearing my face, at my sister, offering hope I didn't deserve. The transformation was accelerating, my torso fiercely beginning to change. Soon there'd be nothing human left. And I realized I'd been asking the wrong question all along. Not, how do I escape, but what am I willing to sacrifice to end this? Not just my own suffering, all of it, everyone trapped in that guardian, everyone the entity would ever consume if the cycle continued. I raised the blade. "Ernesto, no!" Annie started. I drove it into my own chest. The silver burned, the obsidian cut deeper than flesh, deeper than bone, straight into whatever corrupted essence had been growing inside me for 7 years. The entity shrieked through the guardian's mouth, a sound no earthly throat should produce. And I felt it, the connection severing, the transformation reversing, the gray receding from my skin like poison drawn from a wound. But more than that, I felt the souls in the guardian stirring, the blade's power reaching through our shared connection, finding every consciousness the entity had ever consumed. "The blade doesn't just kill," I gasped, falling to my knees. "It severs. It cuts the ties that bind." The guardian was unraveling, literally coming apart, its form dissolving as the consumed souls began pulling free. I saw them, translucent, ghostly but aware. Walter Diamond, Thaddeus Blackwell, Samuel Morton, all the others, one by one, tearing themselves free from their prison. And they were angry. They turned on the duplicate, on the one thing still connected to the entity's will. It tried to run, but 100 vengeful spirits were faster. I didn't watch what they did to it. I couldn't. That was my face they were destroying. Annie caught me as I collapsed, the blade still buried in my chest, but the wound somehow not fatal. The silver and obsidian glowed brighter, and I understood it was keeping me alive long enough to finish what I'd started. The boundary, it's failing. The entity, without guardians, without the cycle. I know, Annie said, tears streaming down her face. Ernesto, I know. But you're going to stop it. You already are.
She was right. I could feel it through the blade, through the connection it had created. The entity was trying to escape, to disperse into the world, to find new hosts. But the ritual weapon was designed for exactly this, not just to cut, but to contain, to trap, to seal. The free spirits understood too. They gathered around me, adding their essence to the blade's power, creating a new prison, not in corrupted flesh this time, in me. No, I tried to say, but the souls were already flowing back, finding a new vessel, not as victims this time, as volunteers, as partners in one final act of containment. The entity fought, screamed, tried to break free, but 100 souls working in harmony were stronger than one ancient hunger working alone. When it ended, I remained kneeling in the clearing, the blade buried in my chest, Annie's arms around me. But I wasn't alone in my head anymore. I was sharing space with every caretaker who'd ever been consumed, all of us holding the entity prisoner together. Not a guardian, a warden. And unlike the old cycle, this time we were choosing it. How long? Annie asked, understanding written in her eyes. Forever, I said, with a voice that held echoes of others. Or until someone finds a way to destroy the entity completely. We'll keep it contained, keep searching for a permanent solution. But Annie, I know, you can't leave. The boundary needs you. The boundary needs us, Walter Diamond's voice whispered through mine. But we're not trapped anymore. We're choosing this, all of us. It makes a difference. Annie pulled back to look at my face, human again, the transformation reversed, but my eyes holding the weight of 100 lifetimes. I'll visit, she said firmly, every week, and I'll keep looking for a way to free you, all of you. We know, I smiled with my own mouth but a collective warmth. That's why this works, because someone knows, someone cares, someone will remember we existed as more than monsters. In the distance, I could hear sirens. Annie's live stream had worked. Authorities were coming, drawn by reports of missing persons and supernatural activity. They'd find the estate. They'd find me. They'd find answers that would raise more questions. But they wouldn't find victims anymore. Just a man who'd chosen to become a prison so no one else would have to. And a sister who refused to let him be forgotten. The blade pulsed against my chest, a second heartbeat, a reminder of the burden and the choice. 7 years of transformation, 100 years of suffering, all of it leading to this moment, all of it meaning something, finally. Take me home, Annie. I knew I'd never truly leave this place again, at least for a little while. Let me remember what it means to be human before I forget. She helped me stand, supporting my weight as we walked toward the tree line, toward the approaching sirens, toward whatever came next. Behind us, the clearing stood empty, the altar bare. The cycle was broken, but the price was still being paid, and would be as long as the entity endured. 1 soul every 7 years? No, 100 souls choosing together to stand guard for eternity. It wasn't freedom, but it was better than what came before.
And sometimes that's the only victory you get.
The authorities called it a mass hallucination event. Gas leak, they said, from old geological pockets in the Appalachian bedrock. Explained the missing time, the townspeople's strange behavior, even Annie's live stream footage that showed nothing but static and distorted audio by the time it was reviewed. Ravens Hollow was evacuated for environmental assessment. The residents went quietly, their empty eyes finally closing, their puppet bodies collapsing once the entity's attention shifted entirely to its new prison, me. Within a week, the town was a ghost settlement, buildings standing empty, nature already beginning to reclaim what had never truly been alive. The Blackwood estate, however, remained, and so did I. Annie kept her promise. Every Saturday she made the drive from Charleston, bringing supplies I didn't need. The estate provided everything through means I didn't question anymore, but bringing something far more valuable: normalcy, humanity, a reason to remember who I'd been. She'd set up a tent on the east lawn, refusing to sleep in the mansion. Smart. The house was mine now, or it was its, the distinction increasingly meaningless. I could feel every room, every corner, every stone. The boundary that had once been a prison was now an extension of my awareness. And within me, the others stirred. "She's late today," Walter Diamond observed through our shared consciousness. He was the most talkative of the collected souls, perhaps because he'd spent the longest time trying to resist. "Traffic," I said aloud, though I didn't need to speak for them to hear. Old habits. "There's construction on I-77. "How do you know that?" Thaddeus Blackwell asked, the estate's original sin, but over the weeks since the ritual, he'd proven unexpectedly helpful. Remorseful, even, though remorse meant little after a century of atrocities. Annie texted. I held up my phone. She'd gotten me a satellite plan that actually worked, another middle finger to the entity's preference for isolation. "She'll be here in 20 minutes. 20 minutes. I'd spend doing what I did every day now. Walking the boundary, reinforcing the seals, feeling for any weakness where the entity might escape. It was constant work, exhausting in ways that had nothing to do with physical fatigue. The thing inside me never stopped pushing, testing, searching for cracks. But 100 souls pushed back, and we were stronger. For now. I completed my circuit just as Annie's Jeep appeared on the access road. She'd upgraded from her sedan after the third time she'd bottomed out on the rough terrain. She pulled into the circular drive and climbed out, immediately wrinkling her nose. "It smells worse," she said without preamble. She was right. The estate was decaying despite our efforts to maintain it. Paint peeled, wood rotted, stone cracked. The house had been sustained by the cycle, by the constant influx of new life energy. Without it, entropy was finally catching up to a structure that should have crumbled centuries ago. "We're doing our best," Samuel Morton said through my voice. He'd been a carpenter in life. These days he directed my hands in repairs that temporarily halted the decay. "I know you are." Annie pulled a large envelope from her backpack. "But I might have found something that helps, real help, not just in slow deterioration." Inside were photographs, documents, and what looked like very old manuscript pages, carefully preserved in plastic sleeves. Margaret Chen's journal wasn't the only thing she left behind, Annie explained, as we spread the materials on the hood of her Jeep. She spent 40 years researching the entity after her husband was taken, traveled to 6 continents, interviewed indigenous peoples, consulted with shamans and priests, and anyone who had knowledge of dimensional parasites. And I felt the collective attention of the souls within focusing through me. And she found 3 other sites like this one, places where similar entities had been imprisoned using similar methods. All 3 have since been destroyed, the entities genuinely killed, not just contained. Hope, dangerous and fragile, stirred in my chest. How? Starvation, Annie tapped one of the manuscript pages. The entities feed on consciousness, on the life force of aware beings. The guardians were never meant to be eternal prisons. They were meant to be temporary holding cells while the entity was starved. 7 years was the time limit, the maximum a human consciousness could sustain the containment before being consumed. After that, the entity would be strong enough to break free. Which is why there were replacements, Thaddeus realized, not just to maintain the cycle, but to prevent any one guardian from lasting long enough for the entity to gain full strength. Exactly, Annie pulled out another document. But if you could maintain containment without feeding it new consciousness, if you could hold it prisoner while giving it nothing to consume, it would weaken, slowly, over decades, maybe centuries, but eventually it would become weak enough to destroy permanently. We're not feeding it, I said slowly. The cycle is broken. No new caretakers, no new souls being consumed. Right, which means you're not maintaining a prison, you're operating a starvation chamber. Every day you hold it is a day it gets weaker. Every week is another step towards its eventual destruction. The implications crashed over us like a wave. We weren't trapped in eternal damnation. We were winning a war of attrition. How long? Walter asked through me. Annie's expression turned apologetic. Margaret's research suggested anywhere from 50 to 300 years, depending on the entity's strength and the efficiency of the containment. 50 years, at minimum. The souls within me reacted differently, some with despair, 50 more years of this existence, some with determination, only 50 years until genuine freedom, some with grim satisfaction, a concrete end goal, finally, instead of infinite suffering. There's more, Annie continued. The ritual blade isn't just for containment. According to Margaret's notes, once the entity is sufficiently weakened, the blade can be used to sever its connection to this dimension permanently, banish it back to wherever it came from. And the souls? I asked quietly. Annie met my eyes. The research isn't clear. Either you're released, genuinely freed, allowed to move on to whatever comes after death, or we're severed too, Thaddeus finished, banished along with the entity, oblivion instead of transcendence. Margaret thought it would be release, Annie said quickly. Everything in her research suggested the souls were only bound to this dimension by the entity's presence. Remove the entity, break the bonds. But she wasn't certain, I said. No, she wasn't certain.
50 years of holding a hungry god prisoner with no guarantee of what waited at the end. Freedom or oblivion. Transcendence or annihilation. I felt the souls within me deliberating, a parliament of the dead voting on their fate. "We continue," Walter said finally, and the others murmured agreement. 50 years or 300, freedom or oblivion, it's better than what we had, better than eternal imprisonment in corrupted flesh, better than the cycle continuing forever. "Agreed," I said aloud. Then to Annie, "Thank you for not giving up on us, for finding hope where we couldn't." She hugged me, careful of the scar on my chest where the blade had pierced, still there, still tender, a permanent reminder of the choice I'd made. "I told you I'd keep looking. I don't break promises to my brother." We spent the afternoon reviewing Margaret Chen's research, making plans. Annie would continue investigating the other destroyed sites, looking for more specific information on the weakening process. We would maintain the containment, strengthen the seals, and wait. Just wait. It was almost sunset when Annie started packing up to leave. She never stayed past dark anymore, not since the night 2 weeks ago when the entity had pushed hard enough that I lost control for 17 minutes.
She'd watched my body contort, my voice become a chorus of screams, my eyes burn with light that shouldn't exist in human sockets. She hadn't run, but she'd been terrified. We'd agreed she'd visit during daylight hours only, when the containment was strongest and the entity was quietest. "Same time next week?" she asked, climbing into her Jeep. "Same time," I confirmed. "Drive safe." "You too," she smiled at the absurdity of the statement. Where was I going to drive? And started the engine. I watched her Jeep disappear down the access road, then turned back to the estate. The sun was touching the mountain peaks, darkness approached, and with it, the nightly battle. The entity always pushed harder after dark. Maybe it was stronger then, or maybe it knew I was more vulnerable, more tired, more prone to mistakes. Either way, the nights were when the real work began. I walked back to the mansion, my sanctuary and my prison. Inside, I locked the doors. Rule 1, still valid even after everything had changed. Then I settled into the chair in the main hall, the ritual blade across my lap, and closed my eyes. The Parliament of Souls gathered in our shared mind space, taking positions along an invisible perimeter. Walter to the north, Thaddeus to the south, Samuel east, David west. The others spread between, creating a web of consciousness that wrapped around the entity like chains. And in the center, raging and hungry and ancient, the thing we'd imprisoned together. It spoke with a voice like continents grinding together. 50 years, they say. Do you truly believe you can last that long? We've lasted this long. We'll last longer. You grow weaker every day. The boy's body wasn't meant for this. Neither were your souls. I feel the cracks forming, Ernesto Brewer. I feel your resolve wavering. It was right. I could feel it too. The strain of containment wearing on all of us. Walter's consciousness was fraying at the edges. Thaddeus's clarity came and went. Even my own sense of self blurred sometimes, mixing with the others until I couldn't remember which memories were mine and which were inherited. But we had something the entity didn't understand. "We're not alone," I said simply. "We have someone who remembers us, someone who cares, someone who gives us a reason to hold on." "One girl," it scoffed. "One human who will age and die while you remain trapped here, sustained by the same power you claim to resist. What happens when she's gone, Ernesto Brewer? When 50 years pass and she's dead and you're still here, still holding me, still suffering? Who will care then?" I smiled and felt 100 others smile with me. "She's documenting everything, writing books, creating databases, spreading the truth. By the time she's gone, thousands will know our story, millions maybe. We won't be forgotten." "Stories fade, heroes are forgotten, only monsters endure." "Then we'll endure as monsters if we have to, but we'll endure together and we'll win eventually. That's the difference between us and you. We understand that some victories take lifetimes." The entity screamed, a sound felt rather than heard, and threw itself against our containment with renewed fury. The house shook, windows cracked. Somewhere in the north wing, a wall collapsed. But the web held. We held. And when dawn finally came, the entity retreated back into its prison, sullen and silent, having gained nothing from its nocturnal assault. I opened my eyes, my singular human eyes, and surveyed the damage. More repairs needed, more entropy to fight, more evidence that the estate was slowly dying, along with the thing it had been built to serve. Good, I thought. Let it all crumble. Let the house fall to ruins and the forest reclaim the land. We don't need this place anymore. We need only each other and the knowledge that somewhere out there, someone remembers we were human once and will be human again eventually. 50 years, or 300, or however long it takes. We can wait. We're very good at waiting now. Outside my window, the sun rose over the Appalachian peaks, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Beautiful, even here, especially here. I stood, stretched my aching human body, and began my morning rounds of the boundary. Another day of imprisonment, another day closer to freedom, another day of being the prison so no one else would have to. It wasn't the ending I had imagined when I'd opened that letter 3 weeks, 7 years, a lifetime ago. But it was an ending I could live with. For 50 years. Or forever. Whichever came first.
23 years passed. Not quickly. Every day was a war, every night a battle, every moment a choice to continue holding when letting go would be so much easier. But they passed, accumulating like sediment, building towards something none of us could quite see yet. Annie kept her promise. Every Saturday for the first decade, then every month as her own life demanded more. A career in investigative journalism, a husband named Marcus who understood why his wife disappeared into the mountains regularly, 2 children who grew up knowing their uncle was sick but never quite understanding the nature of his illness. She'd aged. Gray threaded through her hair now, lines creasing her face, a stiffness in her movements that hadn't been there when she was 32. She was 55. And I was still 34, still frozen in the moment I'd driven the ritual blade into my chest. The entity's power sustained me even as I starved it, a cruel irony none of us appreciated. "You look tired," Annie said, settling into the chair across from me. We met in the estate's library now, one of the few rooms still intact. Most of the mansion had collapsed, reclaimed by nature. Only the core remained, held together by will and necessity. "We are tired," I admitted, and my voice held echoes it hadn't before. The others were speaking more frequently now, our separation eroding. Not dangerously, we maintained our individual identities, but cooperatively. But we're winning. It was true. We could all feel it. The entity's pushes came less frequently, with less force. Its voice, once thunderous, had diminished to a whisper. Where it had taken 100 souls to contain it at the beginning, now perhaps 20 could manage the task on difficult nights. It was weakening, starving, dying. Margaret's timeline was conservative, Annie said, pulling out her ever-present notebook. I've been corresponding with researchers at 3 universities, anthropology, religious studies, dimensional physics. They're analyzing the data I've collected over the years. They think you're at least 70% of the way there. 70%. 7 more years, maybe less, before the entity was weak enough to banish permanently. "Will you be here?" I asked quietly. "At the end?" Annie's expression faltered. "Ernesto, I'm not young anymore. 7 years? I know. I'm asking anyway." She reached across and took my hand. Her skin was warm, paper-thin, scattered with age spots. Mine was still smooth, unmarked, preserved by the very thing we were destroying. "I'll be here," she promised, "even if Marcus has to carry me. Even if I'm 90 years old and can barely remember my own name, I'll be here to see you freed." We sat in silence for a moment, comfortable in the way only decades of shared burden could create. Then Annie pulled out something else from her bag, a small envelope, child's handwriting on the front. "Emma wanted me to give you this, my daughter." Annie smiled. "She's 8 now.
learning about her uncle who lives in the mountains. She drew you a picture." I opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a crayon drawing of a figure standing in front of a house, surrounded by colorful scribbles that might have been trees or flowers or pure imagination. The figure had a yellow sun for a smile, and the words, "Uncle Ernesto is brave," written across the top. Something cracked inside me, inside us all. Walter started weeping silently in our shared space. Thaddeus turned away, overcome. Even Samuel, always the stoic one, felt the weight of being remembered, being loved by someone who'd never met us but believed in us anyway. "She wants to meet you someday," Annie continued, "when you're better, when this is all over. I told her it might be a while, but she's patient." "I'd like that," I managed, the words thick in my throat. "Tell her thank you. Tell her it helps more than she knows." Annie stayed until sunset approached, then gathered her things. She moved slower than she once had, needing my help to stand. At the door, she hugged me tightly. "7 more years," she whispered. "You can do this." "We can do this," I corrected, and she smiled. I watched her drive away, then turned to face another night. 5 years later, Annie stopped coming. Marcus called, the satellite phone I'd finally agreed to keep charged. His voice was heavy, older than it should be. "She's in hospice, Ernesto. The doctors say weeks, maybe days. Lung cancer. It spread too fast for treatment." I wanted to leave, wanted to be at her bedside, but the boundary wouldn't release me, couldn't release me. Not until the work was finished. "Does she know?" I asked. "She knows. She made me promise to tell you. She's sorry she won't be there at the end. She tried to hold on longer, but tell her I understand. Tell her—" She stopped, searching for words adequate to 28 years of devotion. "Tell her she saved me, all of us. Tell her we'll finish this because of her." "I will." The call ended. I stood in the collapsing library, surrounded by books no one had read in decades, and felt the Parliament of Souls gathering. "We should mark this, when she passes, something to remember." "We'll remember," I promised. "We remember everything now." Annie died 3 days later, peacefully, surrounded by family. Marcus called to tell me. I thanked him, assured him I was fine, and hung up.
Then I walked to the boundary's edge and screamed. The entity, weakened but still aware, stirred in its prison. "Your anchor is gone, Ernesto Brewer, your reason for continuing. Let me go. End this suffering for both of us." "No," I said, and my voice was iron. "She didn't do this for 28 years so we could quit at the end. We finish it for her, for everyone she saved by keeping us contained. Sentiment, human weakness, human strength," I corrected. "The thing you've never understood. We don't just endure suffering, we find meaning in it. We transform it into purpose." I walked back to the estate and took Emma's drawing from where I'd preserved it, protected behind glass. A child's crayon image, faded now, but still bright with belief. Uncle Ernesto is brave. 2 more years, I told the others, according to Annie's researchers. 2 more years until it's weak enough. "We'll make it," Thaddeus said with certainty. "For her," Samuel added. "For all of them," Walter finished. "Everyone we've saved by being here. Everyone who'll never know what we stopped." The entity screamed its frustration, but the sound was faint, almost pitiful. We were winning. 29 years and 11 months after the ritual, on a cold October morning that felt like poetry, I felt it.
The entity's presence had diminished to almost nothing, a whisper of awareness, a faint pressure against the containment, barely more substantial than a bad dream. It was time. I walked to the clearing where this had all begun, or ended, depending on perspective. The altar stood weathered and cracked, moss covering its surface, but still present, still waiting. I pulled the ritual blade from where I'd kept it all these years, embedded in my own chest. The wound had never healed, maintained by the same power that kept me alive. I felt the souls within me stirring, gathering, preparing. "Are you ready?" I asked them. "We've been ready for 3 decades," Walter replied. I placed the blade on the altar, then pressed both palms against its surface. The symbols carved in stone flared to life, responding to the power within me, within us. "Entity," I called, "you know what comes next." It responded, but barely. "You've won, Ernesto Brewer. Congratulations. You've starved me, weakened me, reduced me to a shadow. But I remain. I will always remain. Banish me today, and in 1,000 years I'll find a way back. Kill me here, and I'll be reborn elsewhere. You've accomplished nothing but delaying the inevitable." "Maybe," I agreed, "but that's what humans do. We delay the inevitable. We fight impossible battles. We sacrifice ourselves for futures we'll never see. It's our most annoying quality." I grabbed the blade, feeling its power surge through me one final time. Margaret Chen's research had been clear on the final step. With the entity weak enough, the blade could sever its connection to this dimension permanently, but the vessel containing it would be severed too. I would die. We would all die, finally and completely. And I was okay with that. "For Annie," I whispered, "for Emma, for everyone who believed we could do this." I drove the blade downward, not into my chest this time, but into the altar itself, the original sealing site, the anchor point where the entity had first been imprisoned. The stone split with a sound like reality breaking.
Light poured from the crack, not earthly light, but something from beyond, from the spaces between dimensions. The entity screamed, genuinely terrified now, as it felt itself being torn from this world, dragged back to wherever it had come from. The souls within me screamed too, but not from pain, from release. I felt them leaving one by one, Walter first, his consciousness untangling from mine, becoming separate and whole and free. Then Samuel, Thaddeus, David, all the others, 100 souls flowing out like birds released from a cage. "Go," I told them. "You're free, finally free." "And you?" Walter's voice, distant now, already fading. "I go too," I said, feeling my own consciousness beginning to unravel. The blade's power was consuming everything, entity, vessel, the bonds between them. Complete severance, complete purification. Oblivion or transcendence I'd never know until I arrived. "Tell Annie," I started, but Walter was already gone. They all were. Just me now, holding the blade as it tore reality apart, as it banished the ancient evil and everything connected to it. I thought of my sister in her final days, my niece with her crayons, Marcus who'd supported wife's impossible mission, everyone who'd believed in us, sacrificed for us, remembered us. It was worth it, I said to the empty clearing. Every year, every day, every moment, it was all worth it. The light consumed me. They found the estate 3 days later, a research team led by Dr. Sarah Martinez using Annie's documentation to locate the site. They found ruins more ancient than Thaddeus Blackwell's construction, found the altar split in two, found no trace of any entity or consciousness or anything supernatural. They found a body, though, male, mid-30s, perfectly preserved despite being outdoors for days. No identification, no cause of death, just a peaceful expression and a scar on his chest in the shape of a blade wound. Next to him was a weathered photograph of a man and woman at a wedding, the back inscribed, Ernesto and Annie, 2018, and a child's drawing protected in a plastic sleeve showing a stick figure with a sun smile and the words, "Uncle Ernesto is brave." Dr. Martinez bagged the evidence, photographed everything, and initiated a search for next of kin. She'd read Annie's research. She knew what had supposedly happened here. She didn't believe in monsters or ancient evils or dimensional parasites, but she believed in sacrifice. And standing in that clearing, surrounded by the ruins of something impossible, she felt it. The weight of what had been done here, the cost paid, the victory won. "I hope you found peace," she said to the corpse before the team carried it away. "Whatever you were fighting, I hope you won." Miles away in Charleston, Emma Brewer, 12 years old now, her mother gone 4 years, woke from a dream she'd remember for the rest of her life. In the dream, a man who looked like the old photos of Uncle Ernesto had smiled at her and said, "Thank you for believing in me. Your mom was right, you're very patient." And then he'd been surrounded by light, by other people she didn't recognize, all of them smiling, all of them free, all of them going home at last. Emma wrote the dream in her journal, the one she kept to honor her mother's memory. Years later, when she became a researcher herself, when she continued her mother's work documenting impossible things, she'd return to that entry. And she'd choose to believe it was real. That sometimes the monsters lose. That sometimes the sacrifice is worth it. That sometimes brave people hold the darkness at bay long enough for the rest of us to live in light. She'd write books about it, create documentaries, ensure that Ernesto M. Brewer and the 100 souls who stood with him were never forgotten. Because that was the point, ultimately. Not the winning or the losing, but the being remembered, the mattering. The knowledge that someone, somewhere, knew you'd been human once, and always would be, no matter what form you'd taken in the fight. 29 years, 11 months, and 3 days after it began, the Blackwood estate's curse ended. Not with a whimper, not with a bang, but with a choice made collectively to sacrifice everything for the possibility that others might be spared. And in the end, that was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.